The kind of distance that doesn't look like distance. There is a kind of distance that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with silence, or arguments, or slammed doors. In fact, everything on the surface can look exactly the same. You still talk, still exchange words, still respond when you're expected to, but something underneath has quietly shifted. You notice it in small ways, in how you pause before replying, in how you edit what you say before it leaves your mouth, in how you stop sharing things that don't feel safe to explain anymore. And that's the part no one really talks about. Emotional distance doesn't arrive loudly. It settles in, slowly, quietly, almost politely. And by the time you realize it's there, you've already adjusted your behavior around it. Not because you wanted to change, but because somewhere along the way, being fully yourself started to feel unnecessary, or worse, inconvenient. How emotional distance actually begins. Most people assume emotional distance starts when something goes wrong, a betrayal, a conflict, a moment that breaks trust. But that's not how it usually happens. More often, it begins with restraint, with choosing not to say something because it feels like too much effort to explain, with letting a misunderstanding pass because correcting it feels heavier than carrying it quietly, with telling yourself it's not worth it. At first, it feels like maturity. You tell yourself you're being calm, that you're choosing peace, that you're growing, and sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not peace. It's withdrawal. It's the slow realization that being honest here costs more than it gives back. So you adapt. You become easier to be around, more agreeable, less specific. You stop expecting to be understood, and without realizing it, you teach people how little of you they need to engage with. That's how emotional distance begins, not with distance itself, but with quiet compromise. The moment you stop trying to be understood, there's a moment that changes everything. It doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. It's the moment you explain something important and realize the other person isn't really listening. Not because they're distracted, but because they're not available. They hear the words, but they don't reach for the meaning. And something in you notices. You try again later. Different words, gentler tone. Still, nothing lands. That's when you begin to understand something most people struggle to accept. Understanding isn't about clarity. It's about willingness. And no amount of explanation can create willingness where it doesn't exist. So you stop trying, not dramatically, not out of anger. You just pull back. You speak less, share less, reveal less, not because you're cold, but because you're tired of translating yourself into a language that never quite reaches the other side. This is where emotional distance becomes real, not when people drift apart, but when one person realizes they've been standing alone inside the conversation for a long time. When distance isn't rejection, but self-respect. Here's the part that took me the longest to understand. Not all emotional distance is a loss. Sometimes it's clarity. Sometimes it's the first honest response to a situation you've been enduring quietly. Distance doesn't always mean you stopped caring. Sometimes it means you started listening to what your body and mind have been telling you for a while, that something feels off, that the connection requires you to shrink yourself just enough to keep it functioning. And shrinking over time is exhausting. Distance becomes the boundary you didn't know how to articulate. It's not punishment. It's not avoidance. It's recognition. Recognition that connection shouldn't feel like constant adjustment. That closeness should feel safe, not strategic. And when distance appears, it often reveals a truth that was already there. Some relationships survive on proximity, not presence. On routine, not resonance. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. The question emotional distance leaves you with eventually, you stop trying to close the gap. You stop asking why it feels different. You stop rehearsing conversations that never seem to change anything. And instead, you sit with a quieter question. Not, how do I fix this? But what am I actually missing? Is it the person, or is it the version of yourself that felt more open, more expressive, more alive when you believed you were understood? Because those are not the same thing. And emotional distance has a way of revealing the difference. It shows you where you felt safe, where your words mattered, where your presence wasn't something you had to negotiate. And maybe the hardest truth of all is this: sometimes distance doesn't mean something ended. It means you finally saw it clearly. And clarity, as quiet as it is, changes the way you move forward. Not louder, not colder, just more honest. If you stayed until the end, thank you for being here. Not everyone takes the time to sit with quiet thoughts like these. And if this resonated with you, there's a good chance you've carried some of these feelings yourself. This channel exists simply to share moments of reflection. If you felt understood, you're welcome to subscribe and continue these quiet conversations with me. I wish you and your family good health and peace. Thank you for listening.